Welcome back. Okay, so today we are diving into a really fascinating concept, and we're basically going to play detective and trace exactly how money ripples through our society. When we hear about money being spent, whether that's by big firms, everyday households like us, or the government, it is so incredibly easy to just think of it as a simple one-and-done transaction. You buy a coffee, the shop gets your money, end of story, right? Well, not quite. The reality of economic output is actually a whole lot more dynamic and honestly a lot more exciting than that.
So here is the big question for this explainer. How does one single spending decision multiply across an entire economy? I want you to really imagine this for a second. Think about how one single initial expenditure can surprisingly increase overall economic output by much, much more than what was originally spent. It almost sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? Like money appearing out of thin air. The whole idea that there's this massive multiplier effect on the total output of the economy, just as a result of one single initial expenditure. It's wild. It can definitely be a little confusing at first glance. I get it. So we are going to completely unpack this today. We're going to walk through a very specific real-world example to see exactly how this economic magic actually works in practice.
All right, let's put some real numbers to this to make it concrete. Picture this. The government decides it needs to intervene in the market. They pull out the big guns and inject 100 million pounds into a brand new housing project. Now, why would they do this? Well, the goal here is to deliberately stimulate aggregate demand. Essentially, the government is stepping right into the market, opening its wallet and spending within it to create some kind of physical production. In our example, that's a bunch of shiny new houses. So, lock that number in your head. This 100 million pounds is our starting point. This is what economists call our initial injection.
Now, let's watch how this builds step by step, because it's basically a giant chain reaction. First off, the government doesn't just build the houses themselves. They pay a construction company to do it. So that initial 100 million pound injection goes straight into the bank accounts of those contractors. Bam! We instantly have an immediate increase in aggregate demand. But wait, the contractor doesn't just sit on a giant pile of cash, right? They have to actually build the things. So they use a big chunk of that 100 million to pay wages to their workers. Suddenly, all these construction workers have extra income burning a hole in their pockets. And what do they do with it? They go out and spend it. They're buying consumer goods, maybe filling up their grocery carts, upgrading to a new phone, or heading down for a well-deserved pint at the local pub after a long shift.
And right here is the absolute crucial takeaway I want you to remember. Consumer spending directly adds to our national income. Think about it. Because consumption is such a fundamental, massive part of our GDP, this brand new spending by those construction workers literally causes national income to rise. They are consuming more out there in the real world, which means the economy is physically expanding. And all of this is happening simply from them buying their daily goods and services with that newly earned money. It's like they're passing the baton in a relay race. What this does is create a completely fascinating circular flow. Let's look at the businesses that are selling those everyday goods, the grocery stores, the tech shops, the local pub. Because our construction workers are spending more, those firms are now earning more. To keep up with all this new customer demand, what do they have to do? They have to hire more staff, buy more inventory, and pay out more wages themselves. In turn, they're spending that money to increase their own output. It creates this fresh injection of new demand that stimulates even further rounds of expenditure. It just keeps going back and forth, over and over. Households consume more, so firms produce more goods and services, which means firms pay out more to households, and then those households turn around and consume even more. It's literally a virtuous cycle.
Okay, so this brings us perfectly to the formal definition of the multiplier effect. Put simply, it's the number of times a rise in income exceeds the rise in injections that caused it. Let's translate that. It is the underlying magic behind that massive roll-on effect from our initial government expenditure. Because of this constant, relentless back-and-forth spending between households and firms, we end up in a situation where the final economic output is significantly larger than that original 100 million pound injection we started with. The income has literally multiplied as it bounced around between the different agents in the economy. The money didn't just stop at the construction site. It echoed through the whole system.
Now, I used a government housing project as an example, but here's the thing. It's not just government housing that triggers this. The multiplier effect can actually be sparked by any new injection into the economy. Sure, this includes general government spending, things like building new infrastructure or funding benefit schemes. But it also includes things like exports. When international markets demand our goods, they're bringing foreign money right into our circular flow. Or think about private investment. When businesses invest in new tech or factories, it drives higher productivity and therefore more output.
Literally any of these things can shift aggregate demand and kick off that incredible chain reaction of spending we just talked about. Okay, to really grasp the mechanics behind this, and don't worry, we won't get too bogged down in the math, we have to look at two distinct concepts. We have autonomous change, and we have equilibrium real income. Sound intimidating? Let's break it down. The autonomous change is simply that initial injection into the circular flow. Remember our 100 million pounds? That's it. As soon as that injection happens, it shifts aggregate demand. Boom, that is your autonomous change. Now, the equilibrium real income, on the other hand, is the much larger, final, multiplied national income that we arrive at the very end. It's the grand total after all those successive rounds of people receiving income and spending a proportion of it. It's the pebble dropped in the pond versus the final size of all the ripples combined.
And seeing those two concepts side by side brilliantly illustrates what we call the multiplier ratio, which, quite simply, is just the ratio of the change in our final equilibrium real income compared to that initial autonomous change. It is the mathematical way we quantify exactly how much that initial 100 million pound injection actually grew in the real world. It gives us the exact size of the multiplier effect in our circular flow as people received more income and spent a proportion of it to consume more things. It tells us, hey, for every pound put in, here's exactly how many pounds of total economic activity came out.
So we've seen how incredibly powerful this roll-on effect can be for boosting national income. It is an amazing engine for growth. But I want to leave you with a question to ponder. It's a bit of a curveball. If a single injection multiplies economic growth to such a massive degree through this circular flow, what happens to our national income when these initial investments, whether from the government, from exports, or from private businesses, what happens when they suddenly slow down or dry up entirely? Does the multiplier effect work in reverse? Could a single cutback multiply into a massive economic contraction? It really makes you think about the delicate balance and honestly the fragility of this circular flow of income. It's a wildly powerful tool, but as you can probably guess, it cuts both ways.